Well, thank you everyone for being here for my talk today. I am a fellow at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. I do research on Bitcoin mining, in particular with respect to energy and environmental impacts. I'm also a PhD candidate at Georgia Tech, and this was the original title of our most recent policy report, The Locust and the Dung Beetle. And then our co-executive directors came over to me and Troy Cross and said, do you mind if we change this, because we don't think the policymakers will read this if it says the locust and the dung beetle. So of course I said, sure, change it to whatever you want. So now I think it's titled, How Bitcoin Mining Load Flexibility Reduces Emissions. So that is what we're going to talk about. And how do I navigate between slides? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So let me get into this with you. I'm going to actually skip this slide momentarily and go here first because I put them out of order. So I'm actually starting a little differently with this talk. I'm giving you the results ahead of time from our study. I'm starting with this, but I'm doing it for a reason, and I'll let you know why. So basically, the results of our study were that we had 8 companies that participated from the Bitcoin mining industry, and we found that through their ability to power on and off, when compared to another data center that doesn't power on and off in the way that Bitcoin miners do, that they actually can avoid a significant amount of CO2 emissions or carbon dioxide emissions. Within our group study itself, we found that they could avoid the equivalent of almost 3,000 cars being on the road, so taking almost 3,000 cars off the road for a year. And if we extrapolated this out into the entire network, and these numbers are a little bit older, using the newer numbers from Cambridge, it's about 1 million cars. So it's a significant amount, when you contextualize it that way. But, it sounds great when I tell this to the Bitcoin miners, and I did tell this story to them when I was in Bitmain, at the Bitmain conference in June, and, I was like, congratulate yourselves, you're doing something great, pat yourself on the back. But when I tell this story to academics, except for my PhD advisor, thankfully, who appreciates what I do, these are like, seriously, really? Who cares? This is almost verbatim. Yeah, we already know about data center flexibility. So, it can be a challenge when you're trying to communicate these stories to people who are not within the industry or not your PhD advisor. So I want to really emphasize at the start of this talk why this matters. So this matters because, now I want to go back to this slide. It matters because this is also from our policy report. I put this together, collected data from various places. It matters because there's a massive trend in terms of energy use, and this is just looking at the United States. And the United States in particular is growing quite a bit with data center energy use because it is a stable country, relatively good regulatory environment. A lot of the big tech companies are here. And they're really excited about AI. And so, by the way, when I talk about the locust and the dung beetle's Bitcoin, and the locust's AI. And really just like power-hungry or computational-hungry data centers with lots of money. So you see this trend going out into 2027. This is just data centers, in the purple. This is Bitcoin, and I would say that this is something based off of something more technical, power law curve. So I would say this is even a little bit generous for Bitcoin. But this data was taken on AI servers and data centers, was taken from Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and work done by some very, very expert people in the industry when it comes to studying data centers. So we're going to see a massive growth. We don't know exactly, in absolute numbers what this is going to be, but it's going to be pretty big growth. Okay, so that's one reason why this is concerning. Okay, and then the other thing is that there's key differences between Bitcoin mining and other data centers that a lot of people outside of the industry don't realize. And that is that Bitcoin miners are very flexible, but they also have these immense constraints, economic constraints, because of how the protocol is designed. So that means that Bitcoin mining in general has to go and look for the cheapest power. At the beginning, it was not so important, 50 Bitcoin, mining was a totally different thing up until about 2017, going into 2019. The things that you're optimizing for to max out your profit have changed, and electricity cost is like 80% of that. All right, latency is not an issue for Bitcoin mining, but it can be for other data centers, depending on how quickly their end users need to get that information. Temporally agnostic Bitcoin miners, it doesn't matter when you're mining. The reward is going to be the same, at least within that 4-year epoch, right? But that may not be true for other data centers. And then, of course, you can power on and off without hurting the network with Bitcoin mining. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be a machine somewhere that's mining Bitcoin. Not true for data centers, because they provide a service to an end user. And that end user may have some expectations about reliability. Scalability. As you know, I can run a BitX in my bedroom if I want to. Or I can have a facility that is close to a gigawatt in Corsicana, Texas, if I wanted to, if I had the money to do it. But, it's a little more complicated with data centers. I mean, generally, I think nowadays the smaller scale is enterprise, which is like, an organization has, some servers that they're still housing locally. Okay, so those are big differences. Okay, they want me to stand in the light, sorry. All right, so I just wanted to make sure you could see my screen here. Okay, so, but what, I touched on this just a little bit. What is truly the biggest difference between other data centers and Bitcoin miners? It is this. So this is data that I got from Luxor at a conference in June. It may be a little outdated, but I think the order of magnitude is probably still the same, just that, there is about a 17 to 25-fold difference in terms of profit that you can make running AI GPUs versus Bitcoin. And this is a huge topic right now, especially with the big, large-scale investors. JP Morgan Chase has regularly been putting out reports about this. Goldman Sachs, they're all looking into this. These public companies are feeling a lot of pressure to start bringing in GPUs and integrating AI into their Bitcoin mining facilities. You probably are aware of the CoreWeave agreement with Core Scientific, that's massive. So who has the incentive? Obviously, Bitcoin miners have the incentive to turn off during peak demand, to shift their load, to power down. They have the incentive because they're profit motivated. The break-even price matters. And as we go in, I'm going to get into the study. I just want to give a quick overview. Obviously, you're all miners, so you know this, but let's just all get on the same page. So, Bitcoin mining is basically a lottery. You're basically playing a lottery, and you're generating tickets with your machines, and you're trying to find that nonce. But of course, you know that if you guys are guessing too fast, then the lottery is going to get harder. That's the difficulty adjustment. And the reward gets cut in half every 4 years, so that makes it more challenging, especially if the Bitcoin price doesn't go up and double in an equivalent amount. And so you have to get more efficient to stay in the game, right? So that leads to really interesting, really cool second-order effects. And that's where all of this comes in, and that's why all of this matters, because you're able to do things like turn off your load very quickly within seconds. You can co-locate very flexibly with renewable energy generators as a buyer of first and last resort. You can harness waste energy sources like landfills, waste on farms, otherwise flared gas sites, reducing methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. And you can sign interesting power purchase agreements that may help out with build-out of important energy resources that we need for the energy transition. So, right, all of this is really important. You guys have a very unique set of capabilities. But then we have this problem, again, which is that we have a lot of bad press. So we have a lot of FUD in the media that is based off of really bad research, especially from a guy named Alex DeVries, also known as Digiconomist. And so I just, I guessed estimated this, that 99% of all of the bad Bitcoin mining articles are based off of bad science, especially from the people I mentioned. And then this becomes a problem for you because then you get articles like this printed out. And then you get articles like this influencing policymakers like Elizabeth Warren, who wants to do a 30% energy tax on you. That is a problem. So what can we do about this? Well, what we need, at least what I'm doing, is trying to collect data from the industry so that I can show and align with a number of researchers who have stated that the research out there is bad. So Massenet and Jonathan Koomey, Cyan Rankin, they've all, in the academic literature, have pointed out how bad this research is. So what they're saying is in order to improve this, we need more empirical data to be collected so that we can start making scientifically rigorous estimates about the real energy use of Bitcoin mining and what they're capable of doing. So that's what I do. That's what I do at BPI, at the Bitcoin Policy Institute, as part of my PhD research. That's why I come and give these talks, because I want to convince you, I want to convince all of you that it is really important to be transparent if you want to succeed in the regulatory environment. And it's better to be on the offense than on the defense. And for too long, you've been playing on the defense. And the one way that I can help you to play on the offense is if you share data and let me do the analysis and let me put it out there so that we can reach the policymakers and so we can reach the academics and we can start changing people's minds. So what I did, we raised some money. We were able to collect data for this first preliminary study from 10 Bitcoin mining companies in the US and Canada. And so these are companies across different scales, including several public miners. And obviously many of them were in Texas, one in Canada. And we just asked a very simple question, which was, does flexibility promote decarbonization? Obviously, the answer is yes, and I showed you that earlier. And this is just an example of what load flexibility looks like when a Bitcoin miner is powering on and off. So this is energy, so this is megawatt hours over time. And so we looked at basically, those summer peak months that just was where we had the overlap. I had to take out a few companies because we had some problems with the data. Able to put them in, but not able to show you today what that looks like. So we found a very simple relationship here. Calculated what the avoided emissions are versus the estimated uptime in our data. Found obviously, yes, there is this linear relationship. There's this strong correlation that if you turn off your machines, you're going to avoid emissions, right? And that's very intuitive. It's cool to prove that. It's intuitive. But, the interesting thing is that there's companies here, facilities, who had similar uptimes, but yet had, very different amounts of emissions avoided. So what was going on there? This is where it gets interesting for me. Anyway, I hope it's interesting for you. So it doesn't explain everything, and that's because flexibility, it really depends on how you're operating your facilities. And some of you are more efficient than others. That's what I'm finding in my data, is that some of you are more efficient, and you're powering down, and you're still very competitive profitably. So, just having the highest uptime possible is not necessarily the best for your operation. And what we found here with these two companies, or these two facilities, is that one facility was reducing their power about 82 times within our 3-month window, below between 40 and 100%, whereas the other company only did that once. And so this is very interesting because you want to know, well, why? What incentivized them to do that? And I don't have some of these results in here yet. They're going into the paper, the full paper, which is that really it depends on where you're located. It depends on well, how, if you have a power purchase agreement, are you being fully price responsive? And the interesting thing is that in Texas, you see a little mix of everything there. And we have a facility in our study in Texas that is very, very flexible. does a lot of underclocking, and then we have other facilities that are not as flexible. And then you look in another part of the country and you see, they're barely reducing their power, or they're so consistently doing it, like they're clearly following peak hours. And what we're finding is that really the relationship between when you're reducing, what your break-even price is very closely related to when peak demand is happening. So that's very cool. I mean, it's also stuff that you probably intuitively know, but it's just not there in the academic literature, and it's just not there where people, like policymakers, are aware of. So we're taking these things and we're making it more obvious using data. So one more thing that I want to show you from our study is that we've heard a lot from Bitcoin miners that they reduce their power during storms, peak, like extreme weather events, but we've never really seen data that shows that. So what I did as an afterthought, really, when I collected this data, because this was not really what I was planning to do, was that I said, I wonder if I can find that one winter storm from 2024. It was like in January, mid-January in Texas. And I looked, and yes, I did find it. It was very cool. It was very exciting to see this. So this was just some background. This was in mid-January, and it got very cold. One of the facilities, I know, it got as low as 6 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. And there was ERCOT was very concerned about losing power, having power outages. And after that one big storm a few years before, they were very worried. So what happened was we did find actually quite a bit of price-responsive curtailment, some based off an ERCOT signal, which we confirmed with the facility that provided that data. And then one company sent us their LMP data, so we were able to align this here. And you can clearly see, and now I didn't, because, yeah. Oh, I have a laser pointer. Okay, yeah, great. Well, here you can see that this one company, and we confirmed this with them, they actually curtailed their power, completely powered down based off of an ERCOT signal. So they got a message from the operators saying, look, we're about to enter this dangerous power zone. We need you to power off. So they did. So this here was based off of the ERCOT signal. And then they told me that later on it was all price responsive. And I know that these other, speaking with one of these other companies, I know that they're price responsive, and you can guess that the other one was being fairly price responsive as well. And they're all kind of in the same area in Texas. So you can, you can see clearly that they're powering down as prices are peaking. So for much of this winter storm, they were powered down. So by powering down, they were returning that power back to the grid, providing that resource, acting like a virtual power plant, so that those that really needed it, residential people who needed to stay warm, hospitals could stay open, and they were returning a significant amount of power here, maybe around, I don't know, a couple hundred megawatts or so. And this is just, just three facilities in Texas that were doing that. So, you can extrapolate from that and realize that Bitcoin miners are returning a significant amount of power, either based off of signal or based off of price, which is really cool because you have this incentive mechanism here that is entirely based off of profit and based off of the competitive nature of the Bitcoin network and how that works, that incentivizes them to power down and be good neighbors, be good members, good energy users, and help during these extreme weather events. Sorry, are you guys? Okay, so what can we learn, and what is the recommendation from me to policy makers, and for all of you to take to your own policy people and stakeholders, which is that, well, one, we really need to organize our grids so that they incentivize these kind of facilities like Bitcoin mining data centers to be able to power down. And the best way to do that is to provide real-time pricing that aligns with this type of flexibility. And we know this already, right? There's been a lot of research that has shown that this is a really great way to do this, and we need to see this in more grids. And I've actually heard from companies that have told me, you know, I would love to do this. I want to be flexible. I want to be able to power down my facility and provide that power back when the grid needs it, but they just don't have those programs right now. So that's something that you guys should keep in mind. If you don't have that program yet, it's a good idea to start talking with the utilities and say, look, we can do this, and we can help you. We can give you back that power when you need it. We can be that grid insurance that you need. So it's a good idea to have those conversations. And obviously, if you can do that, you're going to be able to improve the grid performance by utilizing this type of behavior. And you'll actually also be able to bring on more renewable energy because you can meet that power where it is. And that's also something that's not in here, but will be in my paper, which is that actually a lot of the facilities in my study, and this could be a little bit biased based off the ones that responded, but most of them were already in very low carbon areas of the grid. And this is across the country. So that's pretty significant. I'm hoping that once I get the rest of the data, because after my last talk, I was able to meet with a few more companies, and I think I'm about to double the number of facilities in the study. And so I'm interested to see what that looks like. But, you know, it'd be a very, very cool result to say, like, well, actually, you know, they're already in the right places. They're already in these areas supporting clean energy. So we'll see. I'm hopeful for some very positive results there. And then lastly, I just want to pitch my spiel here, which is that please, if you are interested in sharing data and you like what we do at the Bitcoin Policy Institute, please come and talk with me because I'm still collecting data. I'm actually starting to move into collecting more data about efficiency in terms of power usage effectiveness and water usage effectiveness, because I also think that there are some distinct differences between the average of what we know in terms of how data centers perform and versus how Bitcoin facilities perform. And in general, and based off just my discussions with members of the industry, that Bitcoin miners are generally far more efficient in their operations. So please, we need more data so that we can improve the research out there, so that we can improve the narratives that are in the news, so that we can improve the understanding of the policymakers so that they stop trying to ban Bitcoin or making your lives difficult. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening to my talk. And special thanks to Clean Incentive for helping with collecting some of this data. So if you, what are your questions? Happy to answer any questions. I don't know how much more time we have, but thanks for listening.
On the policy front, who else do you work with? Texas Blockchain Council, Government Initiative. Who else are you collaborating with to kind of push this narrative?
Yeah, we try to collaborate with all of them. We have a pretty good relationship with the Texas Blockchain Council, Lee Bratcher especially. He's been very helpful with connecting me with miners in their association especially. Yeah, but we've tried to collaborate with all of the organizations that are out there. I'm not usually out in front doing that. It's usually our executive directors, but yeah, we are always collaborating as possible. We'd love to be as open. Yeah, sure. Oh, back there. I think they have a question.
Okay, here we go. So I apologize. Yeah, sure. So I apologize. I missed the beginning of your talk. Too many different things to watch here. But has there been a deep study on ATMs, banking ATMs worldwide and power consumption? and also reduction in branches of banks and their power consumption. Has anyone done a deep study on that to then compare it to where we're headed with kind of digital currencies and electronic payments that way? Because I think that's an eye-opener when you look at that data.
So I haven't seen anything in the academic literature, but I have not really looked in the academic literature for that. But I have seen a report, an industry report, I think it was from Galaxy a few years ago, and they did try to estimate what that was. So it's in one of their Bitcoin mining reports from a few years ago. There's something in there where they did that.
All right, who else?
Are you working in partnership with colleges or universities on research?
So I'm at Georgia Tech, and the only other university that I know of that has people, researchers focused on Bitcoin mining is at the University of Texas, Texas A&M, yeah. Texas A&M, they have a newly formed Energy Blockchain Council, and they have a lot of support from the Texas Blockchain, I'm sorry, they have a new, Energy Blockchain Center, and they're very well connected with the Texas Blockchain Council. So they have done some very interesting work because their group knows ERCOT inside out, so they do a lot of modeling. So they've done really interesting modeling with Bitcoin miners in Texas. Yeah.
So during the study, will there be a differentiation between power expended purely for mining, like an off-site location, versus a location where you're supplementing the heating? Say for instance, you have a mine in the bottom of the Sears Tower in January. Is that really power wasted if it's actually saving you in another area? Does that make sense?
Are
It's
you
like
talking about
cutting-
capturing waste heat?
Yeah, capturing
Yeah, yeah.
capturing waste heat. Is there a differentiation between the two? in the
Yeah,
study?
so that's something that I want to include in the efficiency study. So it's not being considered here in this load flexibility study, but it's a very important one to try to understand and quantify and to really see how many, what's the capability to do that in this industry. It's something that has also been talked about for data centers in general. And but I think that what is really interesting is that a lot of this like flexibility and waste heat capture tends to happen more at the larger scales for data centers like Meta or Google. Like Google was really the first to recently say, look, we're load shifting and we're doing it based off of carbon emissions, or we're doing it based off of that. But when you're talking about like, your more traditional, smaller scale or mid-tier data centers, they don't have the incentive to do a lot of this stuff. So there's a lot of inefficiency in these data centers. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's very important to show that Bitcoin miners are capable of this, but it's also like hard to sometimes convince people in the industry of like outside of Bitcoin, but within the data center industry, but this is also very interesting because yes, I know you claim you can do it, but you're not doing it. So here's somebody who is doing it, and let's take a look and see what we can learn from Bitcoin miners, and maybe other types of data centers can adopt these same abilities. So I think we're going to see a lot of that with AI, especially with the companies that are starting to integrate AI like Core and others, because like for example, Foreman recently came out with this software that can allow you to significantly underclock down to about like 80% the NVIDIA GPUs. And so they can like do really good load flexibility that way. But that it's not well adopted, and that's like just first coming out. So I think that it's interesting that we're seeing that come out of a company that was originally targeting Bitcoin mining. So I think that Bitcoin mining is very innovative and can push data centers to be more flexible as well. Hopefully they'll learn from you guys.
I love it. All right. Say it quick.
It's a very academic question.
Great.
To say, where is the research
Where are you?
In New York, SUNY Binghamton,
Oh, fantastic.
Bitcoin education program.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know about you guys. Very cool. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah. So that's a good question. I'm looking at some of the more high-impact publications. We'll see how they go. I was looking at Nature, Climate Change, and Joule, and maybe Science, because they have published some interesting stuff on data centers, but yeah, we'll see. I'm going to try for the high impact and then see what the responses are. But I think it's important to try to get this type of research in a higher impact journal. So I'm really working very carefully on the narrative to really make sure that the peer reviewers get the main point of why we're doing this type of study.
I love it. Everybody, please give it up for Margot. Thank you so much.